that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change. And as we gather here on this August morning, how can we not correlate what Charles Darwin so critically observed with how NEP 2020 is aiming to make the students not only learn, but teach them how to learn and adapt themselves to the growing competencies required in the rapidly evolving global structure. I, Prerna Kapoor, on behalf of the school management and the founder principal of GD Goenka Public School, Sector 40 in Gurugram, Mrs. Handa, wish you all a very good morning and extend a warm welcome to our esteemed guests and speakers, Dr. Priyanka Sharma, Mr. Atul Bhatnagar, Mr. Ashtamurthy Kilimangalam, and to all the esteemed gathering of school leaders and visionaries present here today. This conclave today is a proud endeavor by GDGPS Sector 40 at Gurugram in collaboration with the Australian Educational Research, that is, ACER, to explore the methods of evaluating and elevating the learning capabilities of the mentees and for effectively implementing competency-based assessments across all levels in tune with the objectives of NEP 2020. ACER is a global not-for-profit development and management of PISA 2025 across more than 90 countries. Our school feels privileged to have partnered with ACER in collaborating the vision of NEP 2020 in cementing a dynamic alignment with the future learning and assessment goals and the desired outcomes. Respected audience, let us now take a moment to focus and be grateful to the eternal power that binds us all together today. Let us all seek the divine blessings of the Almighty as we commence our day's program through the lighting of the divine lamp. Vedic shlokas embrace the headmistresses to please accompany. Shubham kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhanasampada. Shubham kurutvam kalyanam arogyam dhanasampada. No matter how small the eye or what color we might be, like a small candle burning in a lamp, we all can produce the same light. So let's light up this world with our thoughts, our deeds, and our actions. May Lord Ganesha always bless us with wisdom and courage. Let this light always lead our path and always give us wisdom. May the light of this lamp always enlighten our path and strengthen our confidence and competence. May our prayers to the Almighty always light our path and always bless all of us present here today. Thank you so much, sir and ma'am. In order to reduce the gap between the current state of learning outcomes of the students prepared them for life and not alone for jobs, where the learning did not contain forms-based assessments, and then bridge it with an education which is reimagined and meets the goals set in SD4. GDGPS Sector 48 believes in being in touch with the roots while having sight fixed on recognizing, identifying, and fostering holistic education through the scientific temperament. And this, dear audience, is exactly what our competent Goenkans shall now be presenting through a cultural performance. A performance which stands representative of their passion, confidence, and the Goenkan application-based training. Over to our very own gracious Goenkans.
ज्ञान से परिपूर्ण हूँ, पर क्यों विफल हो जाता है मेरा हर प्रयास? आखिर ऐसी क्या कमी है मुझमें जो इतनी मेहनत करने के बावजूद भी सफल होने से मुझे रोक रही है? किताबों का हर पन्ना याद रखा है, फिर क्यों नहीं सफल हो पा रहा हूँ? क्या चाहिए आज के इस समय में सफलता की राह पर बढ़ने के लिए?
कुछ देर ही बाकी है, रख अपनी आँखों से बादल आज हट जाएगा, चाँद तेरी आँखों में बंदे चल के आएगा।
अपने जड़ों से जुड़ने की, अपने मूल्यों को साथ लेकर आगे बढ़ने की, हमारे पुराने गुरुओं की दी हुई शिक्षा को समझने की। सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः,
ना ही हमें सफल नहीं बनाता। सफलता तो ज्ञान को अपने संस्कारों और मूल्यों को साथ लेकर सही तरीके से उपयोग करने की हमारी क्षमता पर निर्भर करता है। मानव विफल होते हैं प्रयास, पर हार दूर हो सकता नहीं। क्यों सोचना कि सफलता के साथ सकता नहीं। अगर ज्ञान और कुशलता को सही दिशा में कार्यरत करने की क्षमता है तुझमें, तो आज सफल होने से कोई तुझे रोक सकता नहीं। कोई तुझे रोक सकता नहीं।
पिघला दे
जीत की राह में
अपनी क्षमता को जान ले,
योग्यता से खुद को सजा ले।
चल आगे बढ़, ये तेरा समय है। आज खुद को सागर सा विशाल बना ले।
बंदिया रे बंदिया, बंदिया रे बंदिया, राह पे चल बंदिया। बंदिया रे बंदिया, बंदिया रे बंदिया, राह पे चल बंदिया।
Yes, the time has come to open the doors of endless possibilities for our children. Donning the armor of skills and wielding the sword of competencies, our children take flight into the future.
Splendid and mesmering. This performance surely drove the point home. Thank you, dear Goenkans. As a host school, we are honored and grateful for the august presence of our esteemed guest today. We have amongst us today Dr. Priyanka Sharma, Director, Research and Assessments, ACER India. I request Principal Ma'am to please welcome Dr. Priyanka Sharma with a token of our respect and gratitude. Can we please hear for ma'am? We welcome you once again, ma'am, and thank you for your presence here today. Thank you so much. Mr. Atul Bhatt, CEO, National Skill Development Corporation, is a thought leader and DNI Global Award winner. I request Principal Ma'am to honor sir with a token of our gratitude. We heartily welcome you, sir, and thank you for giving us your valuable time. Thank you so much. Mr. Ashtamurthy Kilimangalam, Research Fellow, ACER India, is a language assessment expert. I request Principal Ma'am to honor sir with a token of our regard and gratitude. We once again extend a warm welcome to you, sir, and are grateful for your esteemed presence. Our respected founder principal, Mrs. Anuradha Handa, is a distinguished educator and an able administrator with a rich experience of 33 years. Shouldering the strong conviction of engaging and preparing the students for the 21st century VUCA world, the school, under ma'am's guidance, firmly believes in progressively developing the comprehensive knowledge of the students and underlines honing the application-based competencies with student-centric teaching methods and assessments as per NEP 2020. I now request respected Principal Ma'am for the welcome address. Over to you, ma'am.
And respected principals, directors, my principal being here, and Swagatam. I'd like to say here, when here, I must, bring out what Alexander Graham Bell said. Great discoveries and improvements invariably involve today's where the educators who work for the cause of education are all here. We are here to learn, we are here to collaborate, we are here to bring to reality the vision of NEP 2020 and give the best to our children. And such days definitely are meant to create history. So I take you back a little into history as part of my welcome address. As you saw in the presentation made by the children, the point that we were putting across was, and what NEP also clearly states, that we need to look at the history of our education, the Gurukul system, the system of education where the Shishya were handed over to the Gurus. And the education was all about honing their skills, honing their competencies. There was emphasis on culture, values. Because when we emphasize on culture and values is when we build the character. And it is through character building that the personality is developed. That uniqueness in each individual gets identified and honed. And from there, noble ideals and ideas emerge. That is being the purpose of education, and that's how whole beings are developed. This is very much in sync with the new education policy, NEP 2020, that has come in. And what were the practices that were followed in this system? There was so much emphasis on mindfulness, living in the moment, making the most of it, having a focused approach on what we are doing then and there, and completely believing in what we are doing. And that mindfulness is something that we are looking for in our present generation and in our own selves, where there are so many distractions that have come into our life. And then, through mindfulness, building trust, as the disciples were together in Gurukul. The emphasis was on teamwork and building the trust in the team. And when there is an environment where there is trust, there is simple living. The complexities go away as we try, as we start believing each other. There is surely a simple living, stress-free living, and happy relationships, which is the foundation of a flourishing society, where there is happiness in relationship. So these are the integral and key components, these were the integral and key components of education. And then something changed. There's nothing good or bad or right or wrong that we're talking about, but the change always comes because of the changes that are happening in the society, the development that is happening. And in the British era we saw, so from those open areas in the Gurukul, we came into the confined classrooms. There was greater emphasis on theory. The education became more theoretical. There was greater emphasis on rote learning. And the assessor, only at the end of it, pen and paper. The children could recall is what became the assessment, and we've been going on with that for a long time. And as we all seek change, but I would like to take you one step back and, look at it, that what led to this change, and now why are we looking for change? the reason why we are here today. So if we look at of the 18th century, we had the physical labor, basically to contribute to that industrial revolution, because that was the path of progress. And then the second industrial revolution in the 20th century, mass production, and therefore there was certainty, we needed one kind of, and then came in the industrial revolution 3.0, somewhere around 1970s, when the era of computer automation of manufacturing came. And that required deep expertise. So disciplines became knowledge, learning, and STEM, the science, technology, engineering, mathematics, they started to stand out, and the society started to define that the people who are with the science and technology, because there was need for that kind of an application in the job market as well. So therefore, the education emphasized on that. That was the third level of complexity that we reached. And finally, where are we today? In the Industrial Revolution 4.0, where there are cyber-physical systems and Internet of Things, where there is integration of things with technology, the reality of it, the chatbots that have come in. Now, with technology taking the lead, what is the need? What is it that the education system requires? Well, to deal with these changes, to deal with complexity, we are all undertaking competency-based teaching, learning, education, and also using various methods to assess which we call as harmony, which was more about creative presentation and creative assessments, where we integrated all these together. So languages here were used more as a tool, and integration of topics we picked up, like surface area and volume, making, and in social science, picking up public facilities, and the children were asked to research. There was group work, cooperative, teacher assessment rubric, which is shared with the children before they enter into implementation, so that the students are able to prepare themselves. That's the kind of assessment that we have to go ahead with it, which is not a suspense which unfolds on the examination day. Rather, it is an assessment that the child is absolutely aware of and prepares himself or herself to reach that level of competency. So in children, rather just, evaluating competence. So while we are all trying to translate together the best practices in the industry, children, no matter children are studying in whichever school, we as educators, we work from our heart, and we strongly believe that we have to give the best experience to our children, and we have to prepare them for that future. And then who better than Acer, which has a long history of producing these scientifically designed assessments, which can provide diagnostic information which is useful to understand the student's learning progress. So assessment is to understand the learning progress and not to just test the learning. That's the shift that we have to have in our thought process. And with the presence in 70 plus countries, with 7 million plus assessments per year, 10,000 plus candidates being assessed, the website for math, science, and English, these are very creative questions that we see there. So that's what I would like to welcome you all to, and would like to end my welcome address with an interesting quote, for which everybody can have a different takeaway. The difference in 5 fingers brings competencies to its hands. So we must respect the difference in the competencies of our children and make them into a strong hand which can hold the world together and give happy experiences to everyone. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We certainly look forward to the students blossoming into empathetic, agile, adaptable, aware citizens to meet the NEP 2020 standards. As we commence with today's program, please allow me to introduce Dr. Priyanka Sharma, Director, Research and Assessment at Acer India, She is a research scientist passionate about outcome and evidence-driven learning systems. At Acer India, ma'am is responsible for providing intellectual leadership and expert advice to stakeholders both within and outside Acer, besides leading different educational assessments, monitoring and research programs and innovations in the South Asia region. As an educationist for the past 25 years, ma'am worked as a STEM educator, teacher educator, test developer, and research leader at different government and non-government organizations and multinational learning companies. As Senior Research Advisor at National Testing Agency Department of Higher Education, MOE, and Research Head at CAER, she led examinations in India. She is a senior student at Azim Foundation, Test Manager at Center of Excellence, set up by Pearson Assessment Center USA, and Research Head at Khan Academy, India. Her core area of expertise is policy research in the field of educational assessments and measurement, and her interest lies in assessment and learning analytics. I now invite Dr. Priyanka Sharma, ma'am, to speak about the transforming of assessments in next-gen learning systems. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning everyone and namaskar. And I want to thank first to Prerna ma'am and amazing kids, and then principal ma'am for setting the scene so nicely. And now I am just in sort of words that what I am going to speak, they have already done half of the work. Whatever I had thought to share with everyone, it has already been shared. So yeah, so that's, I'm in a tricky scenario now. That, yeah, yes. So as you can see that for next 20-25 minutes, I will be discussing about assessments. But more than assessments, it's about the change. What type of change we are looking in assessment? And that's why I said that Prerna ma'am began with that the most successful species were not who were best or who were strongest, rather who were adaptable. Those who had, and that was the very first sentence which struck me that, oh wow, what I am going to speak now. She has already done that. So that transformation comes from that sentence. Then when these young kids, little kids, basically young minds, they were saying that सफलता क्या है? प्रश्न पढ़ रहा हूँ, उत्तर कहाँ है? So of course that's very much aligned to the theme which we are going to discuss. And then when Principal ma'am, she talked about all those evolution during industrial revolution, that how system changed and how we need to change. We have changed, but still there is transformation is long due. And at this point of time, we don't need slow change. We need to transform. Means we are looking for big changes. So before I move ahead, I want to see few hands. And if there are no hands, I will be very happy. So how many of you feel that assessment is very complex topic, complicated topic, and it is frightening, it's associated with the notion of fear? So if you feel that it is complicated, then please raise hand. And I will be happy to, one hand, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I agree with you. I agree with most of you, those who have raised hands and those who have not raised hand. I am really very more happy for you because you understand already that it is complicated. So before I move ahead, I will share here what is nature of assessment which makes it complicated. Why is it so complicated? Why do we consider that it is complicated? It is most controversial, and many a time it draws attention of the public. Whenever we talk about any kind of reforms, all eyes, they get stuck to assessment. What is happening there? So that is the, I have been a teacher, so I know that is the biggest area of concern. Whenever some circular goes from CBSE and some term assessment is there, it is associated with a notion of fear. So what is there in this? So basically it's its nature. Nature of assessment itself is very complicated. Because what we do there, we measure something, we try to estimate. If we have to measure height, we have a ruler. If we have to measure weight, we have weighing scale. If we have to measure temperature, there is a thermometer. But if we have to measure how much science I know, how much English I know, how much math I know, how much amount of or degree of collaboration do I possess, it is nowhere it is visible. It's very hidden. That is something very within. And then how do we measure it? We try to create certain scenarios. It might be on paper, it might be through some task, it might be through some performance. On the basis of that, we give some judgment that, oh, XYZ is good in math, poor in science, poor in communication. So that journey from hidden to some number, it makes it very complicated. And that is the complexity involved in assessment. But when we are saying that transformation is long due, it means we have to decode it. We have to simplify it. We can't afford it further that it's so complicated topic that people are just, they are fearful, and it is associated with the notion of fear. So why this is right time? So there are two questions here, that is it right time for transformation? Why do we need transformation? So first, I already said that we need to simplify its complex nature. So we need transformation. But at the same time, we are at a juncture of time where we want all children to succeed. So just now, children had presented very, very nice, mesmerizing performance in which we talked about some Gurukul system. But there was a little bit different then, that few people were learning, few people were going to learn, and those who were self-motivated, those who wanted to learn. But at this point of time, when there is knowledge and intelligence-based economies are there, what we want? This is our goal. We are talking about sustainable development. We want a development which is sustainable in nature. It is today without compromising on future development. We want such type of development which is maintaining future. At the same time, we are growing today as well, but not at the cost of future. And in order to achieve that, we are saying that all learners must succeed. We want to succeed everyone. It's not about a handful of people. Earlier, handful of people were learning because they wanted to learn. They wanted to be wise. They wanted to be intellectuals. But for sustainable development, at this point of time, all learners, everyone has to learn and succeed. But at the same time, by success, we don't mean that rat race. By no mean that all are succeeding in one direction, then only we can say that they have succeeded. No, they should succeed to achieve what they can. So it means we have acknowledged that they are different. That's where this sustainable development goal is there, that all learners must achieve and must succeed in what they can. So there are 2-3 notions here. Success in what they can, not in one direction like what we are thinking today. So this makes transformation due, that we need to transform. We need change at much faster pace at what we are doing right now. But what is challenge? That is our goal, and here are challenges. There are certain numbers, certain statistics which indicates that whatever way we are working, that's not working, what we are doing right now. So this number is basically old number. And all of you are educators, principal, teacher, head teacher sitting here. You must have heard about a learning crisis report which had come few years ago before COVID. In that report, there was a number that 60% of our children in South Asia region, they are facing learning crisis. When we say learning crisis, we are not talking about big things. We are talking about very simple things. Just about reading and writing. They can't do. That number is 60%. And this report is pre-COVID. And that report was learning crisis. Post-COVID, World Bank and United Nations, they have published another report. And they have anticipated that now this number is about 80%. And name of that report is Learning Poverty Report. Again, that learning poverty is very simple definition, that whether 10-year-old can read a text. And so this number, that is simply, this number is something which all of us should concerned about, that this is the scenario. And what about them? We are talking about that, fine, 80% are not learning, they don't know. But what about other 20% who are in the system? Those who are entering into higher education. When they pass out of higher education, colleges and schools, they lack these necessary skills which are required for success in work and life. We are not talking about success in terms of whether they have gained very powerful position or whether they are driving change, but we are talking about certain basic skills which is required in our everyday life. And so with that, we are talking about, on that we have conceptualized, we means people around the world. They said that if that is the scenario, we have to change learning system. We are no more talking about education systems, because education system, academicians say that it has almost collapsed, because education doesn't mean learning. That we have concluded, that schooling doesn't mean learning. Even our spending 10 years in school, children are not learning. Even after education system is spending so much, number of schools have grown like anything. But children, those who are coming out, of course, I am not pointing out any school, please. So these are very few of the system. And if I have used the term next gen learning systems, few of the schools, certain handful of schools, if I have to say, they are already there in next gen learning system. But here we are talking about sustainable development goals, we are talking about masses. So learning system has been redefined. And as all of you are academicians, educationists sitting here, you know that earlier we used to say that there are 3 pillars of learning: curriculum, pedagogy and assessment. Now there are no more 3 pillars, because learning happens in an ecosystem. There are different components which interact with each other, which drive each other. So these are different pillars there. Curriculum, of course, it will remain, because it drives entire learning experience of a learner. Curriculum doesn't mean simply a set of topics or syllabus. It's some total of learning experience designed for a child or for learner or anyone. Then personalized learning we are talking about. We are not saying curriculum, teaching and assessment. So teaching has been replaced by personalized learning. And of course assessment will remain as such, but it will change, because we are talking about transformation in assessment. Professional learning, it's for whom? For teachers, for educators, because they are enablers. They have to make it possible that every child succeeds, every learner succeeds in achieving what they can. Learning resources, that is again it plays very critical role in driving learning within the system. And then data management. Many of us say that data is going to be biggest asset in coming days. Why? Because data gives you evidence. Till now we had been making decision based on we say that gut. So at many times it works, but it doesn't work. So we say that gut or insight, we need to match our gut or insight with data. That is the evidence, and then it works. So these are 6 core components of next generation learning system. So if we have to achieve those sustainable development goals, so we have to see that all these 6 components are moving in tandem. They are driving each other. And in order to do that, we have to ask ourselves these few basic questions. What is the purpose of education? What are the outcomes which we are trying to drive? What are the context in which learning is happening? So all these features, they are component of next generation learning system. So in this entire cycle, what's the role of assessment? Because we say that assessment is complex, assessment is complicated, but let us simplify it. It's not that much complex, it's not that much complicated if we try to understand its role. What's its role in that big system, next gen system? So very first thing, as we said, that data is power, data is going to be the biggest asset. So assessment helps us generate some data. Data means evidence. I'm not talking about here, data doesn't mean only numbers. Data means evidence. So what happens that once we start any system, so there are two ways. Always, you know that all of you must have used this sentence many times. Begin with end in mind. So that even if you consider that assessment is end, we need to begin with that. So assessments help us define what we want to achieve. And they are curriculum which we express in terms of outcomes. So that is the beginning point. So for people, those who have been able to decode assessment, that is not something end product. That is the main driver which decides what we want to achieve. That's outcomes. And what happens on the other side, what we have? We have number of constraints, political scenario, socio-economic status of kids or our society, climatic changes are there, and we say that we have a huge population, so all those are limitations and constraints, but it will remain. That is beyond the control of people who are working in education sector. Other people have to work on that, so they are constraints. So we have our standards or learning outcomes which we want to achieve, and there are constraints. These two together drive these learning systems, that what is inside it. And then what happens, that all those processes and those inputs, they result in learning outcome. Assessments help you again to probe, to match what has been achieved. What has been gap that needs to be roped into the process. But here is the gap. We measure, we probe, we stop there. We don't rope in back into the process. So those lines, they are the gap where we need to work. When we say that transformation is due, we have to focus on that part. Secondly, when we say that transformation is due, it's also for policymakers. Because assessments tell us where is the gap. That gap needs to inform policy again. And if few of you have seen these reports that if you have heard about Kartik Muralidharan, that name right now I am able to recall, and there are many education scientists who have now started questioning that whether our outcomes have been set at higher level. Because it's not only trend in India, it's globally also in past 30-40 years, many of the education systems, they have either they are witnessing flat curve or downward trend. So learning curve is not there. So a big question is being raised by social scientists and education scientists, that have we set outcomes high? So it means whatever findings of assessments are there, it has to inform policy, it has to inform practice. So if we look assessment from this lens, then all that complication and that notion of fear, that goes away, because it's a very strong tool. It's not a complicated part of this process. And how does it work? Then you say that, okay, you have said so many things, you have made this your own cycle, own process, but we don't trust it. So you would like to ask evidence. So evidence has been given by few of such people, those you must have read in your books of B.Ed, M.Ed, and still I believe that you quote them. So one evidence comes from here. Face might be known in textbooks, and even you can relate. So what did David Oswald said? The most important single factor influencing learning is what the learner already knows. So that is what is within learner, that is the most important factor which influences learning. It has been proven over time that where I am, my previous knowledge, that has highest impact in learning. And how can we know where I am? What I already know, who is going to tell me? What is the tool for that? That is assessment, which tells, here I am. So for teachers and educators, they have to use assessment in that spirit, that it is giving me evidence where a child, a person, a learner is, and build on that. So if we see from that lens, then we are moving away from the notion of fear from assessment. Second, evidence. This is again a very popular phrase, very popular name. Most of us refer. What is that? What did Vygotsky say? That there are learning, this is the very concept of scaffolding. That at the core, this is the area, what I know. The second circle is where I will go with support. Third circle, which I can't achieve. So, but who is going to tell me where I am at the center? Assessment tells where I am at the center. Then teachers and teaching material and entire learning system, this is to take me to second circle. I can't go to third circle. Third circle is of anxiety, stress. This I can't achieve. So entire system enables the learner, a child, to go to second circle. But again, here it's very important to know where I am, what is in that inner circle, and there its role of assessment. So these are just few of the evidence which gives us hope that why we should believe that assessment is a driver. But of course, we have to think about assessment differently. And that's why I will be talking about certain shifts which is needed, and I will rather call it paradigm shift, because these are not a small shifts. We have to think in entirely a different manner. And the shifts are of both types. Certain things are technical and then also cultural. So what is the norm? So I had got an opportunity to analyze board question papers of many years. And at the same time, I have also, for the sake of my own learning, I got opportunity to witness several classroom-based assessments. And this was the common finding. And I think all of you will agree with me that this is the real scenario. Even if you will today look at board question paper from this lens, that what they are assessing, you will still find that this is the fact, despite all this whatever conversation and dialogues about the reform. But what we need authentic assessments for valued outcomes. So this is very first thing. What are valued outcomes? So Principal Ma'am had already talked about this just few minutes back, that what do we value in our system? Do we value certain facts to remember, or we value collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, or empathy? What do we value? So very first thing, we need authentic assessment. So authentic assessment is a technical term which we say that what is relevant today, that is said authentic assessment. So, and then assessment of what? Valued outcomes, which matter for work and life. So we need to move from this norm where tests and examinations are dominated by questions to authentic assessments. But how we can do? Teachers can only drive that, because again I will quote one study, not one study, that is meta-analysis for more than 30 years, and every year there is a professor, John Happy, he keeps on adding various factors to that. So what he does, he tries to identify different factors which impact learning, and he tries to shuffle them on CJ scale, that which has most impact on learning, which has least impact on learning. So in his study he has concluded, so different conclusions might be change a little bit statements, but finally he concludes that more than 3/4 of factors which influence learning are within schools. Outside schools, there are very less factors. When we talk about outside schools, it's about policy, it's about socio-economic status, but inside schools, who all are there? Kids are there, teacher, principal, learning material. So they are the most influential factor who impact learning. That's why it says that teachers' capacity building in new generation assessments. When we are saying that we don't have to assess those low-level cognitive processes, we have to assess valued outcomes. Who can do that? Teachers. So teachers need to understand what is importance, what is significance of valued outcomes and how it can be done. So then second, we can leverage technology to facilitate variety of assessment formats. You know that many a time it happens that you have to pitch assessment right at the level of child. It's not always possible manually because you have to take care of a big classroom. So technology can be used as an enabler. Not that technology should be considered as a barrier or technology should take away everything from humans. No, technology is a tool which we have to use, whether it is ChatGPT or AI or machine learning or deep learning. There are different terms all around us, and many a time we get confused that are human beings going to be redundant? No, never. They are just a tool for you. You have to play with technology. We have to play with technology. And we have to use it for betterment of our kids, for betterment of our system. So this is what, if you see that, when we talk about valued outcomes, this is a recent list released by World Economic Forum. They have named it Taxonomy 4. So Bloom's taxonomy, DOK and all that, I think I should not even name that in front of teachers and educators, but World Economic Forum has named it Taxonomy 4. And if you see that what we considered as our religion, that is at the bottom, that disciplinary knowledge. Of course, it's still there. It has not become redundant. It will remain forever. But there are many other things which are more important than this. So if we are talking about abilities and skills, अभी बच्चे बात कर रहे थे योग्यता और क्षमता and dakshata, all that. So here I will quote one of my colleagues. He has been in the field of assessment and he has named his daughters Shamta, Yogyata, and I was really much impressed that he is so much into his profession that he is using these terms to name his daughters. And even kids were talking about this, and of course Principal Ma'am had said. Then comes attitudes and values. We talk about sanskar, हमारे values क्या हैं? That is at second position. Then it comes knowledge and information, and then that is disciplinary knowledge. Then when we say abilities, again, abilities are cognitive. So when we talk about cognitive skills, many a time we try to limit ourselves to book knowledge. So cognitive skills, again, problem solving, all that, they sit at the juncture. So it's fine. Bloom's taxonomy had given us a framework to think differently. But nowadays, what we say that we need 21st century skills, many of them are combination of lots of cognitive, affective skills. All of them, they are combination. We can't segregate. And for our survival, we need all. So when Prerna ma'am said that survival and adaptability, so it was sum total of all that, which you see in level 3, that it helps us to survive in the world. And that's why we need transformation. Our present system is nowhere there. It's catering to only that bottom one line. Second type of shift, what we need, these are the norms. This is current scenario, that over-reliance on marks. And I think it's month of April and results are due. And all of you must be thinking, बच्चों को क्या मिलेगा, कौन कहाँ आएगा, because it's deep rooted in our system, whether it is 99% or 98% or 97%. But all of you know that if you are sitting here, and how does it matter after when we are 40 years old or 50 years old that we know it today? That might be even we have that the people who were getting like even less or more marks. Today at this age, all of us are at the same platform. And might be someone who was getting less marks in college or university, they are far better than me. So it doesn't matter in long term. But at that point of time, all all of us, and that we know that how much anxiety it is creating among young kids. So that is the norm. If purpose of assessment is, if we have seen that cycle, is to give feedback to child, feedback to teacher, feedback to system, feedback to parents, feedback to policy makers. But what happens? When do we give this feedback? Either very superficial. In report cards we say, have done good, can do better, can do far better, excellent, can do far better. But it doesn't tell me anything about me, what I need to do in order to do far better. Or many a time it's too late. And then what happens? Many a time we give a single aggregated score, which hides everything. If it is 90%, even in terms of marks, if it is 90%, if I had got 100 in one and 80 in another, it will be 90. So it hides basic information. So this is the norm at this point of time, where we need to be. So assessments need to provide meaningful information which can drive that cycle of change. And it should give information about learning outcomes, outcome-centric. And at the same time, it should be able to tell me where am I at the journey of learning. And from there, where can I go? So that is the desired paradigm. How it can be? So as educator, as assessor, as stakeholders, we need to find and provide information on multiple aspects of learning behavior and proficiency, not a single score on single domain. Multiple aspects, multiple occasion, multiple evidence, so that there is a concrete conclusion we can draw and we can give meaningful information to child, where am I and where I can go. Third shift which is needed. We talk about formative assessment most, that is with CCE, when Right to Education Act came, this was a follow-up, CCE was follow-up. And after CCE there were formative assessments and summative assessments. And fortunately at that time I was part of CBSE. And I have witnessed how all these constructs have been misconstrued, that formative assessment. So all the policy talks about formative assessment. In practice what happened? Basic essence of formative assessment, which is formation of knowledge, it got lost. So we need to move to formative assessment. It means formative assessment which informs classroom practices. So that is desirable, although in policy it is there, but in practice we need to reach there. We need to support, we need that kind of assessment that supports teacher and students in learning, and it enables improvement in teaching and learning. And what happens, this feedback, nowadays we are talking about much used term is personalized learning. And many a time teachers say that how can I deliver personalized learning to 40 kids in my classroom or 60 kids in my classroom. Many government schools, they have 60 and 80 kids also. This group sitting here, I know that you are fortunate enough where you might be having maximum 40 kids, somewhere 25 to 40. But there are classrooms where kids are up to 100. So how can I deliver personalized learning to those 100 kids or 40 kids? So here, like from practice, what we say that, what as a researcher, and from our own experience also, and we have seen some samples also, different practices, that every child doesn't need personalized, that they can personalize themselves. But in your class, at least you can identify 3 or 4 broad categories. One, who might be at below grade level, grade 2 or grade 3 in their journey of learning. Most of your average class will be on grade level. And there will be few kids who are much ahead. So there is evidence, of course, that I am not going to discuss here, that even in class 10, there are learners who are at grade 3 level and there are learners who are much ahead. And even in class 3, there are certain learners which are at par with grade 10 kids. So what we are doing with them who were at grade 10 level in class 3, we have wasted their 7 years. So we need to give them more challenging tasks, where those who are below grade level, they need to be brought up to that level, not by putting them in different grades. They have to be taught differently by changing practices. So we say that assessment needs to be used to adjust teaching learning practices. So not that 40 kids in 40 ways, but at least there might be three broad categories. They need to be tackled in 3 different ways. So what will happen? Lower ones, they will come up to grade level, and those who are above grade level, they will find challenging enough, because we saw that if the child who is at grade 4 or 5 level and we are giving them content of grade 10, what is happening? Child is completely disengaged and is in zone of anxiety and stress. And the child which doesn't know anything, so whatever you will do, child will not move into second circle. Child will remain in first circle, because we are not giving intervention at the right point. How? So here this is when we say that holistic and intelligent learning systems. So in the beginning, 5 minutes? So that's 5 minutes. So that is coherent learning system, because we have witnessed that this piecemeal approach is not working. What happens at one point of time when we talk about curriculum reform, all of us talk about NCF. When we talk about teacher training, all of us talk about teacher training. When we talk about formative assessment, all of us talk about formative assessment. So this unique piece, it doesn't work. There is enough evidence. So what we have to think about coherent learning systems. Because in system what happens, everything takes care of one another. So those 6 components which was in beginning, so we have to think it holistically. Again, this is a little bit about higher stake assessments and least relevant about classroom, because in higher stake assessments what happens that most of the test, it targets medium ability students. So in classroom also, as I had given last example, so it happens sometimes, but we have to cater to wide range of abilities, whether a child is at the bottom of the scale or at the higher end. And this is one of the tools which we say that adaptive testing is one tool, but adaptive learning is also there. That there are so many things at this point of time that even if I am at class 5 and I am not able to do a class 3 sum, so it gives me hint that can you do this way, can you do that way, and from there then I can attempt grade 5 level. This many of us have witnessed that this first one, that if we make any assessment higher stakes, it is prone to cheating. People find way outs to game the system. So we need integral assessments. One of that is, of course, adaptive assessment, but besides that, how it is relevant for classroom. Use multiple evidence to conclude about child position and child performance. If we are using multiple evidence at multiple point of time, it's less prone to cheating, because we are not depending on any one thing. And most important one is this one. Because I was looking at rubrics which Principal Ma'am had shared, I think 30 minutes before, that there were number of descriptions. So when we talk about transformation, that assessment needs to be transformed, so what will happen? What can we anticipate? That it will not give a single score, that like we used to get in board that I have got 90% or 60%, or my CGPA is 8.9 or 9.8 or 6.9, or my grade is A or B plus. So anyways, but there was a single number or word or grade. What will happen that if we try to shift this system, then there will not be any single information like that. There might be multiple descriptions, that I can do X things, A, B, C, D. I can do M, N, O, P with little support. I can't do X, Y, Z with whatever support you give me. So these kind of descriptions. So as a society, are we ready to accept those kind of descriptions? Then till now what we have been thinking about, in math these many percent, in science these many percent, in English this much percent. But now what we have to think about, we have to think about communication, abilities and competencies. So are we ready as a society? Are we ready to accept that? That now sports are not for science, math, English, Hindi, rather for those skill sets which we are talking about. Only then we will be able to move from content to competency. So we have to create a platform where these are being accepted as an educator, and only then society will accept. Then, till now all approaches have been school centered, but we have to move where every child learns and every child, every learner can succeed to achieve what they can. So we have to shift that focus also as well. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience, and I hope I have not bored you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your vision and transforming our thoughts to achieve the goal of sustainable development and how the required paradigm is needed. As we proceed further, please allow me to introduce Mr. Atul Bhatnagar, former COO, National Skill Development Corporation. Sir is a mechanical engineer from IIT Kanpur and did his MBA in Marketing and Finance from IIM Calcutta. After spending nearly a decade and a half outside India, he found his home calling, wherein he committed himself into nation building. Sir left NSDC in November 2015 as he found his inner calling to become an advisor to startups and not-for-profit organizations in the field of skill development, education, renewable energy, and fintech. He is currently associated with Pan IIT Alumni Reach for India, wherein he focuses on skilling blue-collar workers. Sun Moksha, wherein as a director, Sir continues to empower lives through development in villages. Sarthak Educational Trust, where as a board member, Sir empowers differently abled individuals, and IIMC Innovation Park, where he mentors the startups. Sir's corporate career was primarily as a banker with over 2 decades of experience in global banking business. He worked in 3 major international banks, Citibank in India, HSBC in Dubai, and Barclays in Kenya. During his stint in Barclays, Kenya, Sir won the Male Diversity Champion Award, picked from among 1,500 nominees from the bank's global pool. He also bagged an award for the Best COO in Africa. Sir helped his bank secure the Best IT Bank Award given by Business Journal Africa, which also featured him on the cover of the July 2011 issue. I now invite Sir to deliver the keynote address on Should Skilling be the Third Religion in India? Over to you, Sir.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here today amongst so many principals and educators. And I did not get the chance to really say thank you to the principals from the schools that I got trained in. And most of them have gone to meet the maker. But today, I'd like to say, kind of through you, through your fraternity, is where I have come here for. So, sabko aapko mere naman. Thank you very much. Because it's the principal who sets the culture of a college, culture of a school. So thank you, Dr. Handa, Dr. Sharma, people from the ACES group, and all the educators who are here. It's very humbling for me. And I just thought that I'd like to share where I have reached, whether it's success or not, I don't understand that, but it's a journey that I'd like to share with you, because you are the ones who are going to set that, let's say, culture in whichever school that you are from, so that there are more students who can come forth and shine for the country, for themselves, and I think for an educator the best and the most satisfying thing that they can ever experience is the student success. So with that in mind, now I put a pretty provocative topic: should skilling be a religion? And let me just try and explain that. What a religion is basically a set of beliefs, cultural systems, and they relate to humanity and to an order of existence. Now, this is what a plain definition of religion is. And should India have a third religion as skilling? Now what are the first two really? First religion is of course cricket. It brings everyone together. It doesn't matter, caste, creed, culture, no bar. Cricket. The next religion is Bollywood. Again, it doesn't matter which caste you're from, which part of the country you're from, you just love Bollywood. And should skilling be the third religion? Now, this is Swami Vivekananda. I think he is the youth icon, even though he died at the age of 38. But this is what we want to do, the skill capital of the world. Now, India may have missed its earlier mark being the superpower, but as for skilling is concerned, we can still be the skill capital of the world. It's not just a mission statement, it can be reality. And that's where I think you people can play a major part. Now, you've heard of the word demographic dividend and demographic disaster, but let me just explain that. On the left-hand side that you see, set of people, youth, going forth, and a lot of rupee symbols on top. That means they are generating economy. On the other side, they can be seen as a black and white demonstrations on various aspects of the country's politics, and that can lead to disaster. Now, what is this demographic dividend? By an established figure was by 2022, our average age of our youth will be 29 years. So it's already 29 years, let's say. That means 65% of the population is less than 35 years old. Now, if these people do not get the requisite skills, then we can have a disaster coming in. And you keep hearing of some universities, some kind of demonstrations happening, people committing suicide, murders, whatever it is. Why? Because the empty mind is a devil's workshop. We need to put in a creative mind, we need to put in some constructive mind. If we can do that, that would be a demographic dividend. Another stat would be like across the world, the population is aging. In Japan, the average age is 48 years. In Japan, there are more adult diapers being sold than baby diapers. Europe, the average age is 45 years. Even China is at 38 years. India is the most populous and one of the youngest republics in the world at 29 years. So you've got a very big opportunity. I'm not saying we are going to be exporting labor from here or workforce from here, but there is going to be, let's say, a paucity of people abroad, nearly 55 million. And India will have a 47 million surplus. But this opportunity can only be harnessed if we skill relevant to a particular degree. Like say, in Japan, if you were to skill people for Japan, and they have already signed an MOU, they want some 3 lakh technical interns. They are not saying that you skill them to the last degree and make them perfect, because Japanese perfection is a world trademark now. But they are saying they should be taught our culture. So Japan, you've seen Japanese bow now and then. So the angle of bow, and how patient they are, how timeliness they, how much of hygiene standards they have. Now those are skills you have to provide them. Those are cultural things that we have to ingrain in our people. Timeliness, in India, timeliness, IST becomes Indian stretchable time. But the fact of the matter is, when you go to somewhere abroad and you are working with a cross-cultural set of people, keeping time is a very, very important thing. So how do we start this right up front, right from school level? What do we do? Now, our problem out here is that we have taken graduation as a matrimonial passport. बेटा ग्रेजुएट हो जाए, शादी हो जाएगी, जॉब भी मिल जाएगा, लेकिन शादी हो जाएगी ग्रेजुएशन से आप, एंड देन यू बिकम अ डिलीवरी बॉय फॉर जोमैटो, तो प्रॉब्लम बढ़ जाती है, कम तो नहीं होती. तो एटलीस्ट वी हैव टू नाउ take this, let's say, the fetish for having a degree. If you don't have a degree, what will you do in life? Now, to give you an example here. Now, how many of you really would remember a single product from South Korea in the 1980s? You may not even know where the country was at that time. Today, there will be a product either in your home or in your purse or somewhere nearby from South Korea. Why? 95% of the people in South Korea are certified skilled. Certified skilled, and I'm stressing on the word certified. And when you say certified skilled, you don't talk about how many MBAs, how many PhDs, how many BTechs, and how many doctors, nothing. 95% people are skilled in South Korea. In India, that percentage is less than 5. Certified skilled. People are skilled. People are skilled, not a problem. I mean, if India people hadn't been skilled, the country would have been shambles. But that's not the point. It's certified skilled. And when you say certification, obviously one step before that is an assessment. Because only when you assess somebody can you give a certification for that particular thing. So we have to now look at skill development and give it just a due respect as in education. Because no matter how many schools we build, how many universities we get, we will not be able to transform the lives of some 500 million people. Especially when the feedback coming from the industry is our graduates do not have the requisite skill to be employable. And let me come to that now. Now what is happening here is, if I were to just differentiate education using calculus, say education was a graph here, theory, knowledge, soft skills and core skills, we can see a lot of marks being talked about, but not soft skills and core skills. So the slogan that I would like to leave you people is learn a skill, earn more, learn more. Do your graduation on the side. I'm not against graduation. I'm a lifelong learner myself, even though I may have so-called 2 premier degrees. But the fact of the matter is I haven't stopped learning. And let me be very frank, I've got a degree in marketing from Calcutta. Well, it has the status symbol behind it. But frankly, in the heart of heart, I know that I was taught marketing in the physical space. So billboards, print and TV and how to write a copy, etc. all that bit. But today the world has changed to cyber world. We are talking of likes and Insta and Facebook. I don't know about that. So my degree is actually outdated. And I have no hesitation in saying so. And I'm learning now. I'm learning social media marketing. Why? Because I don't know. I have to learn myself at my age itself. Because my lifelong learning has to continue. I cannot rest on my degrees alone. And I still want to keep working out, of course not in a formal employment, but whichever way. So this is why it's important to keep that skill and the learning going, no matter, for me, I haven't yet, let's say I haven't left school. I really want to keep learning every single day. Now this has not come out too clear, but let me just say this is the domains where the employable talent from 2016 to 2022. On the left-hand side are a whole lot of degrees, BE, BTech, MBA, Bachelor of Arts. I've actually taken this from a particular report that was India Skills Report of 2022 by VBOBS. Now on the right-hand side, the last one you would see that the employable talent is less than 50%, and which is also high by the way. For MCA and all, it's around 70% people are unemployable, or BCA or whatever, bachelor's. So this is the data coming in from the industry. Why industry? Why am I talking of industry and all? Because people have to get, at the end of it, I have 2 outcomes to look at. Either you get a wage employment or you get a self-employment. There is no third outcome. What will all that, as I said, कि पढ़ाई तो बहुत कर ली, वो शुरू में कल्चरल उसमें डांस में था, पढ़ाई तो कर ली, लेकिन सक्सेस कैसे आएगी? वो तो तब आएगी जब you get employed, either self-employed or wage employed somewhere. So we have to be very, let's say, aligned to what the industry wants. And I'll come to that, look, how we can do that. Now, this is how which sectors hired the most and how things changed from 2015 to 2022. Of course, internet businesses, software, hardware, IT, pharma, BFSI, they all are quite open to you by 2022. Now, I'm not saying that you have to put your entire population of students into that direction. There are people there will be students who got other competencies, and we will address them too. The reason I'm saying that these people have been hired and all is what is the skill that they brought forth. So when they came into that particular sector, they were able to get hired. That is my stress right now. What are the skills in various states? Now you can see here, Delhi and Haryana, English as second language were among the 6th and 7th. Numerical reasoning, Haryana was at 6th. Critical thinking, Delhi, Haryana, 6th and 7th again. Computer skills, Haryana was the 7th. But you can see some of the other states also. I'm not trying to say, okay, look, we are doing badly. But unless we know what the problem is, if we don't diagnose the problem, we will not be able to solve it. So this is just holding a mirror and saying, okay, look, this is the current condition that is there. How do we improve? How do we take it forward? Is something we'll have to do. Let's say collective wisdom has to be put through to it. Now, states with the highest employability, Maharashtra, UP is coming as second, which is very surprising. 6th is Delhi, and 10th is Haryana. So Haryana has just come amongst the top 10 states. Cities with the highest employability, Pune is coming out topmost. Mumbai is 9th, which is surprising again. But Delhi is at 6th now. Gurgaon is not showing here. Maybe they clubbed it with Delhi, but I'm not too sure about that. Now let's plan for the VUCA world, and people are just talking about VUCA world, which I was very happy to hear that people know about VUCA, which is great. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now how do we do what we want to do? By 2025, these are the skill groups which are being, let's say, the World Economic Forum report, Future of Jobs for 2020, listed them, these as your skills. Critical thinking and analysis. Now we've been talking bits and pieces about it, but at the school level, this is what needs to be focused on. Problem solving, self-management, working with people, management and communication of activities, technology use and development, core literacies and physical abilities. This is where the school can play a major part, right up front. So, and students have to be taught and made aware that, look, we are assessing your analytical skills, we are assessing your creative skills. So this is not about marks. This is not about topping in class or being amongst the top 10. It is about seeing how you think creatively, how you analyze a certain set of data or information, because this is what's going to be used later in future. I mean, if you give them that goalpost, look, we are making you ready for the world lately, because this is for the world, this is not about India alone. I suppose you'll get a better buy-in from them. The technologies that are going to be adopted, cloud computing, big data analytics. Now, again, I'm not too happy with this slide, even though it's been mentioned from World Economic Forum report, because it talks most about technology. And technology, for me, is it's not just a vertical. Technology is not like saying, you learn your languages and you do some degree in Java and C++, Python, and a whole lot of new languages that are coming. Technology is also horizontal. So where technology meets health vertical is health tech. Where it meets education, all these online portals that are coming, is ed tech. Where it meets agriculture is ag tech. Where it meets pharma is pharma tech. So technology as applicable to a certain sector is what we need to focus on. That's where the passion of that student, if he or she is showing interest in pharmacology, how do I embed technology as an enabler for that learning to happen, so that person not only learns about pharmacy and etc., pharmaceuticals, but also applies technology to be able to do that. And ma'am here is Dr. Sharma, she's a biotechnologist herself. This is where we need to kind of see where the intersection is happening between biology and technology. It wasn't there earlier, now it is. We're talking of now nanorobots being created to be able to detect cancers and take care of cancers in future. That's technology and biology. How do we get this transdisciplinary approach that again Dr. Sharma was talking about earlier? So technology not in just, look, I've got a degree in cloud computing, I've got masters in data science. If I don't understand data science and if I can't apply it to make some good use in an industry or even for my own startup or whichever way you want to look at it, that knowledge is insufficient. So these are the top 15 skills for 2025. Analytical thinking and innovation, active learning, critical thinking, creativity. You can see all here. Emotional intelligence. Now this is what I would like to kind of draw your attention to. Emotional intelligence is very important in the current VUCA world. And for this, if you have to teach, if you make the child aware about whether meditation or self-management or all the life skills that we are taught about, we guys, for us meditation came in much later, spirituality came in much later now. Obviously now the Indian, and I was very happy to see the start of the program, we are talking about Gurukuls, and we talked about the cultural dance itself was in the Gurukul setting itself. So that is very important that we have the Guru-Shishya relationship really, rather than the teacher-student relationship. Why? Because it enhances the emotional intelligence of a child. He or she doesn't look at success as only marks, doesn't look at moving to the next grade, etc., but looks at holistically, what have I developed into? Now this is some of the social and emotional skills. Now this is how the skills are shifting. So on the left hand side you see physical and manual skills and basic cognitive skills which are going down. 11 to 14, the number of hours that are being devoted to them is going to come down. Higher cognitive skills, social emotional skills, technological skills are going to go up. You can see on the right hand side, between 2016 to 2030, next 14 years, these are going to show an increase. And how do we do this? What is higher cognitive? This is about advanced literacy and writing, quantitative and stat skills, critical thinking, complex information processing. So doctors, accountants, research and analysts, writers, editors typically use this, higher cognitive skills. Social emotional, the soft skills. Communication and negotiation, both very important. And this is something that I learned from when I got into corporate in programs in Citibank, etc. In Citibank, when I just joined, I'm talking of 1990, we were all from good colleges, and we were asked to actually, we were taken to a hotel for 1.5 days. We were given a course on telephone courtesy. 1.5 days. It was just about lifting the phone and saying, good morning, Atul Bhatnagar here, Citibank, how may I help you? And then, how do you talk to a customer? Don't put down the phone before the customer puts down the phone. If you have to direct the call somewhere else, first tell the other person what you're going to talk about, then you do the phone. This is the kind of emphasis that they were putting on communication way back then. Communication is very important. I just talked about the telephone scene, but so rather than just only talking about recitation or debating, sometimes people just don't know how to talk on the phone. So whenever I used to recruit somebody for my call center, I would rather have, I put two people in two different rooms and role play a telephone call and see how the person talks. Because when you're talking on a call center scenario, you're blind, you don't know who the customer is. Your voice has to smile. You have to talk in a different form compared to when you're talking face to face. So in a branch scenario, you can talk, you can wave your hands, you can call somebody else to help you, but in a phone, you are all by yourself. So communication itself becomes a very, very critical thing. It's not just about how do you make a presentation or how do you debate well or what kind of English you speak. Technological, advanced IT skill, data analysis, engineering research. So these are going to lead to further your engineers, robotics and scientific experts. Now, some from my own, I just thought I'll share some of the learnings that I had from my own life. So when you talk about critical analysis and thinking, one has to be foodie for data. It's like a foodie, you know where do you get the best burger from, where you get the best pani puri from, and where do you get the next jalebi from. You have to be like a foodie for data. When you see data, you should be able to get insights. It's not about growth rates, it's not about percentages, it's about what insight you get. And I started my life in Citibank and I was in fraud control for credit cards. Now I didn't know what fraud control for credit cards is. We are talking 1990. We were launching the first credit card in India at that time from Citibank. I just knew the spelling of fraud and control, but I never knew what it all meant. But over a period of time, I could make out from just seeing the spend of customers, look, this person is tending to become a fraud and this person is not. So that is how the data speaks for itself. It's like translating the mathematics into English. And from English to some kind of data, the decision-making process. Emotional intelligence. I'm a great believer of art of living. I do Sudarshan Kriya on a daily basis. For the last 23 years, it has helped me a lot. It just gives me that power to be able to absorb stress in any kind of situation because I don't have to take a tablet or I don't have to take any kind of drink. It's the same air that you breathe and I breathe. If I breathe properly, I keep my emotions in check. That's all that's there in Art of Living meditation. So when you talk about meditation, it doesn't mean you have to sit on top of a mountain and do something or sit quietly. You could be sitting in a metro for that matter and doing your meditation. You don't have to fold your legs also. Just sitting in a proper position and doing dhyan. And as Indians, we've got let's say it's part of our DNA. We just don't seem to follow it, or we don't feel, at one time we used to feel shy of doing it. I think we should be proud of it really, because that's what helps us. And in IIM Calcutta, I'm talking of 1989 now, our teacher, I would say guru at that time, he said you will forget every single course that we have taught you, but this one will not. There was a course we were doing, the managerial ethos, the Indian way. We used to start a class, 3-hour class, by sitting on the ground. You start with hymns, you used to do this lamp lighting, and you used to then talk about the Indian way of management. I'll give you an example. Between, like, on the Western front of the Western philosophies talk about brainstorming. So you talk the thing, de Bono principles, and there are many others. You do keep putting ideas onto the board, and then you try and string them together and find out what's a good idea. On the Indian side, it's brain stilling. The brain stilling is you collect into yourself, and that's when you get your insights. So there are two different ways. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but there is an Indian way to it. Like Western ways, work enlargement. So you want to CEO, I used to hold a P&L for 1 billion, I have 10 billion, I've got so many people reporting to me, I've got so many officers, so much is my team strength. So you work enlargement. The bigger the expanse around me, the better it is. Now, you apply that to a sweeper. He or she is sweeping the road in front of you. They say, oh, great work, I'll give you 2 more streets to clean because you're doing very good work, so you need to pick up expanse area. That's not going to motivate the person. Here in Indian ways, work enrichment. So the person himself is seeing this particular work as, let's say, a thank you to God. He's been given a role and he's performing that role. And he performs it to the best ability possible. It doesn't matter whether it's got 1 street or 10 streets to clean up. So there are these differences between the two which one has to be thought about. You can become aware of it. So I taught spirituality, I was taught spirituality way back in 1989. At that time I didn't quite believe it. But over a period of time I thought that was one, let's say, strong factor which pulled me through a whole lot of different experiences that I got in life. Transdisciplinary. Now, it's like, the MBA and masters in some field. Now, do you want to be the master of business administration or do you want to be a master in something that you are passionate about? There's a hoard for MBA-ship. I mean, everybody wants to become an MBA. But what do you get out of MBA, really, very frankly? I was there in some of these webinars for even IMA, and I was thinking, isn't it time that we change that B into a D? Because B is for business and D is for data. And data is now over all encompassing. You should be masters of data administration rather than masters of business administration. Because business follows what the data comes out from. So these are changes that you have to change our own mindset upon. Cross-cultural thinking now. Here when I was in Dubai, I was a regional manager across 7 countries. So Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, Mauritius, Egypt, Lebanon, and UAE. I had a team with so many different cultural experiences that they had. Somebody's holidays is different, somebody's celebration. I mean, used to have, I had a team of nearly 25 different nationalities, and they spoke amongst themselves 48 different languages, including Pashto. Now, how do you manage such a team? So it's about how you can relate to a much wider set of humanity rather than just Indian or maybe non-Indian or US itself, because that's the most famous place anyway. Then computational thinking, like how credit scoring. I'll give you an example. Everybody's got a credit card. You know that you apply for a credit card, and they nowadays, of course, there's CIBIL score and all that. But we did a stats analysis way back in year 2000. We said, what are the significant variables on your, let's say, application form, which can help me predict that this particular customer will go bad and this customer will not go, will be a good customer. A defaulter versus a good customer. And we ran through a whole lot of stats analysis and came out 15 such variables. So there are 85 variables on your application form. 15 was significant. Now, you would say, okay, why should you do all this? I mean, you know what the income of the customer is, you know what loans he or she has taken, take that -2, how long have you been in a job, and that should give you a relatively good idea. That's what we are using anyway for 4, 5, but we are seeing still our, let's say our NPAs are going up. Then we found that number of dependents was becoming a significant variable. In a place like UAE, that many people go to UAE without their families, they're in a bachelor mode. So the people who had 0 dependents in the UAE were a very high-risk customer. Why? Because they had no, there was nobody at home to, at least especially there's no wife around the place to really take care of their spending. So the guys will spend, and then they will get into a debt, and they will start defaulting on the debt. People with 1 and 2 dependents were the best customers. Why? Because they had some, let's say, ankush around them, कि भाई ज़्यादा spend नहीं करना है, good credit card का bill भी करना. Then 3 to 6 were moderately customers, moderate risk customers, and 6 plus, again, the UAE people, they have big families, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 children. So that is what we were trying to do. So this is what I was kind of leave you with that mindset, we need to have data speak to us. These are the increasing demand that we're seeing, data analysts, science, big data specialists. As you can see, data, digital, project management, robotics, all these are coming very important. Decreasing demand, accountants and auditors not required in the future, financial analysts not required, bank tellers rated, these are all not. I will ask my presentation to be shared so you can have a look at it in detail. Now this is what the National Skills Qualification Framework. How do we draw a parallel between the education system and how do we draw a parallel with the skill development system? So this is where you can have a look at it at your own time. Now, a thing like cyber security, why I'm saying cyber security? Because this is one thing that will be there as long as IT is there. As long as there's IT, there will be somebody to hack it. When you need somebody to hack it, then you need someone to prevent it. So it's such a role, and cybersecurity doesn't mean only one person. This is the entire organogram for cybersecurity. This is a career graph of how a person can, if he's showing, let's say, some, let's say, knack of doing cyber fraud control, this is what it comes out with. Now, national occupation standards, these are ways by which you can train. Now, when you say competencies, all the blue things that you're seeing here, I'd say these are like 11 chapters of a book on cybersecurity. And on each of them, you can be assessed. Based on the assessment, you can know that I know this particular thing well. Like say, work effectively and collaboratively is point number 8. How do you test that? And how do you manage a project team? So these are some of the writing skills, reading skills, oral communication. The reason I'm saying this is, these are skills related to an industry. So when you say an unseen passage, when you produce an unseen passage and tons of them, and then you ask them to summarize in 150 words, that's the typical English language question paper. If I were to give them a project report from an industry and say, okay, do an executive summary, same thing you're doing. But that's what the industry wants. Yeah. One final piece of advice, think about the skills. And I keep saying this for myself also. Look, I never got hung up, look, I qualified as an engineer, then I became an MBA, then I did National Skill Development Corporation, so I was a skill development expert. Today I'm talking as a consultant in renewable energy. Now if I had only got stuck to designation, then I would have stayed there. But I worked on the skills. What skills did I get out of engineering? What skills did I get from an MBA? And how I put them together to chalk out my own career somewhere we can be happy with. So there is this website, I've been associated with this company, so I'll just mention it, and there's something called Youth for Work, YOUTH, for work. And they have these self-assessment techniques. Now one is, as ma'am said, okay, look, we need to do assessment. Here the child assesses for himself or herself. And that's very important. If a child can assess his own potential, then the chances that he or she will stick to it for life are far greater than somebody advising him. Okay, look, you are good at this, maybe you're not so good at that, and something else. So these are, Youth for Work has got these tests. It's got those IIT tests and NEET tests and all the other prep tests, but it's also got tests for you yourself. And let's say if you were to do a psychometric test or a behavioral test or even an English test. I did an English test for the heck of it. I got something like 90% on all that. But there were nearly 1 lakh people who tested themselves. 3 months later I get feedback, look, no, your test scores are going into the 80s because there are other people who have done better than you. So I was kind of, so again you go and do that. And it's one of those ways it's again artificial intelligence related software where your next question becomes harder if your previous one was less in terms of its hardness or in terms of its complexity. So it's a way to even assess yourself. So I would strongly encourage to, maybe offline we can talk about it, but these are ways by which you can, let's say, let the child explore his own potential. And when that happens, then you can, when the person comes with his own passion, Then you start developing that and taking that forward. And of course, you people are the experts on how do you take the whole class forward, but everyone has its own, as you rightly said, that amongst the five fingers, it's only how you, when they become a hand, that's when they become most powerful. So you know how to make that happen. I don't want to teach you into that, but I'm just giving you the tools by which you can, let's say, make your school grow and grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving us food for thought and for inspiring us to make India a skill capital by differentiating education. And thank you, sir, for giving us a slogan, learn more, earn more, and for empowering our emotional intelligence. Respected audience, we shall now be proceeding towards the tea break in the foyer area where a hot cup of tea awaits all of you. Request the guests seated in the last rows of the auditorium to exit first from the 4th floor CD block, followed by guests seated towards the front of the auditorium. All are requested to be seated back after 15 minutes from now for the next session. Thank you. Request for adherence of time. Thank you so much. clear goals, their attainment and completion, and allows space for student engagement and success while preparing for them for real life. Respected audience, please allow me to now invite Mr. Ashtamurthy Kilimangalam, served as a research fellow with Acer India. Since joining Acer India in 2011, he has managed the learning assessment of secondary institutions, the National Assessment for Bangladesh, the Read Alliance Assessment for evaluation of early grade reading interventions, amongst others. He is currently a Deputy Liaison Officer for PISA 2025 and has also been involved in a variety of assessment programs including IBT, India Progressive Achievement Scales, and the Southeast Asia Primary Learning Metric. In addition, Sir has been involved in capacity building programs in secondary curriculum, assessment and examination reform program, Uganda, and for University of Maldives. Recently, he has been a facilitator for regional workshops in India across 5 states on robust learning assessments as part of a UNICEF project. Sir has co-authored a report on the transition of English medium instruction from the local language in a South Asian country and a thematic review on learning strategies used by countries to ensure quality learning outcomes during COVID-19, and that was published by UNESCO Bangkok. Prior to joining Acer, Mr. Ashtamurthy has worked for several years in developing quality tools for language assessment in various languages. He developed the language assessment tool for the national assessment in Bhutan. He worked at the Educational Initiatives Private Limited Services, where he was involved in projects related to language assessment. Sir holds an MPhil in linguistics from the Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages, Hyderabad, India, and his research interest is the assessment of reading across languages. I now invite Sir to conduct a session on competency-based assessment for the school leadership. This session, dear audience, will be followed by a Q&A session of 10 minutes. Over to you, Sir.
Okay, so just checking how much time I have. So I've been told I have 45 minutes and I was thinking 1 hour is a little bit short. So let's see how we go. So I think people are still trickling in from the tea break, but I think we should start because otherwise I definitely won't have enough time. So what we're going to do is, so far we've talked about competency-based assessments, why we need them. Ma'am talked about historically how Indian traditional systems use competencies and how we moved away from them, and how various iterations of the Industrial Revolution have emphasized different competencies, right? So that's more of a outward picture in terms of what is needed to survive in the economy or to be successful in life. And Atul sir was also talking about similar themes. Priyanka, on the other hand, was talking more about how we can transform education to meet those needs, right? Specifically focused on assessment. So what I find is that we've sort of set or established the theoretical need for competency-based assessments, right? We understand why we need them and what it is that we're hoping to transform. So in the short time allotted to me, what I want to do is see how we can operationalize that, concretize that. We'll talk about what competency-based assessments are, how they're different from traditional assessments. So we'll talk about how competency-based assessments are slightly different from traditional assessments and how we can actually use them. So I'm not going to focus on developing competency-based assessments, this is too short a time for that. But what I'm going to focus on is one aspect. So Priyanka talked about one important core fundamental transformation. She talked about moving from grades and marks to skill descriptions, right, to descriptions of abilities. So we're going to talk about a little bit about how we can do that, or at least an example of that, that you can actually access right now, right? So that's going to be our progression. So I'll just go ahead. I'll briefly introduce ACER. ACER was established in 1930 in Melbourne, Australia. Initially it was established under the Australian government, but soon with the understanding that assessments need to be a third-party assessment, they're more effective if they're third-party assessments. It was moved out of the government and became a non-for-profit research organization, right? ACR is international leader in the areas of educational research, development and provision of high quality assessments such as IBT, professional learning and publications. Right? So I'm sure you've heard of some of these assessments at least. For schools we have the IBT, which we'll talk about in detail, the assessment of language competence, which is ALC, PAT, which is focused in Australia, the Progressive Achievement Test, and the ISA, the International Student Assessment. So we are, in recent years, we've established presence globally. As ma'am mentioned, we are global partners in conducting PISA, right, in implementing PISA. So we actually, as we grew, we realized that it's insufficient to have a presence in Australia, and therefore we needed presence across the world. So we've expanded to India, Indonesia, Malaysia, UAE, and UK right now. So in India, ACR was established in 2005. It's also a not-for-profit, and it's a wholly owned subsidiary of the Australian office. Our areas of focus are similar. Assessment of student learning outcomes across South Asia. I think in my introduction you heard about how I've been involved in assessments in different countries. Currently we are actually doing the national assessment for Bangladesh. We are also involved in reforming assessment in Nepal. We've just completed the assessment in Bhutan. So assessment of learning outcomes across South Asia, and of course different states and NCRT and CBSE in India. Educational research and evaluation, so where you need policy support or you need to understand the impact of interventions. Policy advice and support that flows from evidence gathered from our research. As an example, I said you're currently working on the Bangladesh National Assessment. An interesting finding which sort of relates to what Priyanka was talking about in terms of assessment and how we can simplify it is that a finding that it's not yet out in the public, so I hope you won't quote me until the report is out. But one interesting finding has been that teachers who are confident that they understand their assessments, that their assessments are high quality, they understand the purpose behind those assessments. Students who study under those teachers, they perform much better, right? If teachers are, we're not actually checking their assessment actual concept, whether they understand the assessment. Simply the idea of being confident about assessments, that is sufficient to drive performance of students up, right? So those are the kind of pieces of research that we undertake and provide to policymakers. Capacity development for education professionals across both government sectors and different schools. Publications, of course, we have a teacher magazine which you might have seen the poster outside. I've already talked about partners and our services in India. Our regional presence also I've talked about. So let me just quickly move forward. So we've talked about the need to transform assessment, right? We've talked about it in different ways. So what is it, why can't traditional assessment meet the needs of the new gen learning or new gen teaching? What is it that traditional assessments lack? Or why is it that we are suggesting that we move to a different model? Why are we suggesting a paradigm shift, as Priyanka mentioned? The traditional approach is focused on number of years spent in school, right? If you spend 1 year in school, you're expected to know a certain amount, right? Irrespective of who you are, what you knew at the beginning of that year, what your learning styles are, how fast or what is your learning pace, right? You might find that there are students who learn a bit slower, but if you give them more time, they actually learn that concept. But if you rush them and try to put them in the same bucket as the other students who learn faster or who learn slower, they struggle, right? So the problem is, these are thought of as discrete elements. You think of 1 year as separate from the previous year. There is some acknowledgements that it's not completely discrete. So for example, if you look at the learning outcomes from NCRT, you'll see that there is some continuity, there is some progression, right? However, there is insufficient acknowledgement of how of the issues caused by putting students in year buckets. So whilst the year-level approach has benefits, so if it has problems, why do we use it, right? Because it is a good way to organize students. It's a way that has worked well traditionally. So now we're suggesting that we move forward. So But, so what does it not acknowledge? Learning is accumulative and not discrete to year levels. So if, for example, especially with the no detention policy, right? What happens is if you've not learned the concepts in grade 2, you move to grade 3, you are unlikely to pick up the concepts in grade 3. And suddenly now you're promoted to grade 4 and you're still lagging behind on grade 2 competencies. You slowly, the divergence increases, right? You're no longer going to be able to catch up with your students and without a lot of help. There's a lot of acknowledgement of this. There are many programs that try to address this, but that's the issue with the traditional approach. Problem 2 is similar, but its idea is that anybody who's been in a classroom understands that students or classroom populations are not homogeneous, right? Not every student in a class or most students in a class will not learn at the same pace or they will not have the same ability. So you understand that some students will need more support on certain areas. Some students might be better at mathematics, but they may struggle with languages or vice versa. So you may need to provide more support to certain students in certain areas. As Priyanka was mentioning, most of our high stakes assessments focus on the middle level, right? We say, okay, if students can pass or students can get 50 or 60%, or well, now it's become inflated, but the idea is that we're focusing on the middle level and say, okay, if they achieve this, that's fine. But what happens is if students who are exceptionally talented, they don't get to build on their higher skills. So we talked about Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, right? So their zone of proximal development doesn't get acknowledged. They're still lumped together with students who are further behind or much further ahead, right? The third problem. How do we demonstrate real progress? This is something that Priyanka touched about briefly, about grades and marks, right? And she suggested that we should have descriptions. Now the problem is, let me ask you a question. Let's say as a student, in grade 6, I scored 60% in mathematics, right? And then in the next year, I scored 70% in mathematics. So I'm in grade 7 now, and I scored 70%. Do I show improvement? What do you think? Have I improved?
Traditionally, yes.
Traditionally, yes. Okay. Yes, how many people say yes? Okay. How many people disagree? Why, ma'am? Why would you disagree? Exactly. We don't know what the test assessed, right? We don't know if the test was, what concepts the test was assessing. We don't know if it was easier, more difficult. For instance, the grade 6, 60% might have been the better performance because that might have been a harder test. Or if you come from an English perspective, I've actually seen teachers who say, oh, you can never give full marks to an essay, right? Maximum you can give is 8 out of 10. Or other teachers who say, oh, if all the points are there, it's well written, why don't we give full marks? So the approach, the attitude towards evaluation, that can also affect how much you score, right? So 60% to 70% is incomparable. You can't compare the two. There's no way to see if there has been actual growth, right? So that's why we need some kind of measure to see if there has been actual growth. Priyanka touched upon this briefly when she was talking about a scale, right? She was talking about height. So if I say I'm 5 foot 6 inches right now, and next year I'm 5 foot 8 inches, I don't care what you measure me with. You may use a Camlin scale, you may use a Natraj scale, a ruler. I don't care what you use it with, but the scale is feet and inches. And you know that I've actually grown by 2 inches. You know that there has been growth, right? Or weight, right? Any of these factors, any of these, you can measure any of these using a scale. So we need to find something similar in education so that we can actually show if there has been progress made. So it's not a new, these are not new ideas or new concepts. These have been acknowledged, these have been debated the world over, and they've been debated in India as well. So the National Education Policy 2020 actually acknowledges this and says it calls for a shift from an assessment system that is summative and primarily tests rote memorization skills to one that is more regular and formative, is more competency based, promotes learning development for our students, and tests higher order skills such as analysis, critical thinking, and conceptual clarity. The idea is we move towards an assessment system that is able to describe students' skills, a competency-based system where we know, okay, these are the competencies that students are supposed to have at this level, and Do they perform well? Do they have they acquired those competencies? Can we move them forward, or do they need more support in that at that level? So these three problems are the reason why, or these three problems encapsulate why we want to move towards competency-based assessments. Okay, so I just want to summarize our discussion. So what do you think? Why do we assess competencies? Why are we assessing competencies? So sort of we had that discussion. I just want to see if you have, if you can summarize our discussion so far. I think Sir talked about reading a passage and being able to summarize. So I'm checking if you're able to understand what I presented so far and summarize it. Any answers? Check the growth of a child, exactly, that's one. Any other factors? There's less variance in terms of what you're measuring. Okay, fair enough, absolutely.
It is exactly what the world wants right now.
Exactly, okay, it's something that addresses the needs of the world, okay.
It's more of progression based and not just the achievement against the standard set.
Right. So you can actually see the students' growth. I think that's mentioned. Okay, I agree.
To set some benchmarks.
To set some benchmarks. Okay, so you can say that at this level students need to achieve this, which is difficult with traditional systems. Okay, fair enough.
It also helps in enabling an individual achieve his or her best.
Absolutely. So if you're measuring what level the student is at, and you're measuring at that level, so it enables you to measure, it enables you to customize assessment so that you're measuring at the level of the student. Okay, unfortunately we are pressed for time, so let me just go ahead and what we have captured. I think you pretty much summarized it very well. So to determine if students are able to transfer or apply their knowledge to unfamiliar context, how, when and what knowledge to apply, as ma'am said, that is what the world requires right now, because what skills you, I think Sir mentioned this as well, that he was not talking about learning engineering, but he was talking about the skills that he picked up in engineering and tried to apply it to his new jobs, right? So something like that. To determine if students are equipped for deeper learning and higher order thinking beyond memorization and basic comprehension. So our systems are geared towards making sure that students have minimal skills, right? We check, try to make sure that they have minimal skills and we promote them. But what we want to do, or as Priyanka put it, we target the medium level or the middle level. Now what we want to do is make sure we go deeper into skills. Competencies cover knowledge, skills and abilities needed for success in workplace and civic life. So the shift is from knowledge-based assessments to moving towards knowledge, skills and abilities. So how is a competency-based system different from a traditional assessment system? It focuses on an assessment for learning approach. So we talked about formative assessments, we talked about providing feedback, ensuring that assessment is integrated into the teaching learning process. And the assessment tasks themselves become more performance-based, they're more activity-based. Instead of reproducing what you've learned, they're actually going to act upon that knowledge and show what you have acquired. Individualized and equitable learning pathways. So what we're going to do is, that is the area that I'm going to focus on today, yeah, learning pathways. But the idea there is, what are learning pathways? If we want to see growth, if you want to see where students are this year compared to next year, you want to have a scale, right? And you need to be able to chart saying, okay, students were here this year, next year they're supposed to be here, next year they're supposed to be here. You can't do that with a traditional system. You can't say 60%, 70%. We already established that can't be compared. So we need a way to compare. For example, with height, right? If I say when I was 8 years old, I was about 3 feet high. By the time I was 10 years old, I needed to be 3 feet 6 inches or 4 feet or something like that, right? There are benchmarks set. So somebody talked about benchmarks. So we can actually see whether they are achieving those. And we can also see, sometimes it is not just about achieving benchmarks, it's also about saying, okay, the student seems to have done well, he scored 80%, but what does he actually know? As an employer, I think one of the statistics quoted was employability, right? They may score a lot of marks in their board exam, or they may have done really well at the university level. But what skills do they have? There's no description of that. Right? There's no way for me to look at it and say, okay, the student can do this. So that's what we're trying to provide. And how does that help the student? It helps the student and the teacher because they know, okay, students are supposed to pick up these skills at this level. The next level, you progress to these skills, right? And you can actually see when you look at the performance in the assessment and say, okay, they're at level 1. Now the next level skills are these. They're described in your report. They're described in the assessment scale. Transparent and participative teaching. I think ma'am talked about this in the Harmony example, where we talk about rubrics being transparent, rubrics being shared with students before the assessment. That's very, very important because not only does it help students understand what you are assessing, and therefore they can focus on those skills. They know, okay, what it is that I'm supposed to, what it is that I'll be assessed on, so focusing on those. And it helps them to get more ownership. They understand, okay, they will be able to self-assess. They'll be able to say, okay, this is what was expected of me, this is what I did, but this is what I missed out on. Yeah? So there is a lot more ownership, there's more self-regulation, there's more self-learning, there's more self-assessment. So the CBSE attempted to also have its own competency-based assessment. I think it's available now, the Shuffle. The idea is to see how you can incorporate not just knowledge, but skills and other aspects so that you have continuous assessment and that feeds into the teaching learning process. ACR was involved in developing the assessment framework for Shuffle. So we've talked a lot about competency-based assessments, right? We've said students need to have competency, we need to see growth, but the fundamental challenge, right, is, it sounds very good an idea in theory, right? But the fundamental challenge is how do you describe competency? How do I know if the student has mastered? It's very easy with the traditional system, right? I know what 60% means. He got 6 out of 10 questions correct, right? Or he might have got 6 out of 10 marks. Now, how do I say this student has, these are the competencies that students have? So competency comprises what, so first we need to define what competency is. This is just one definition, right? This is ACR's definition, or this is the definition that ACR uses, I should say. Competency comprises knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Mastery of those skills, mastery of the domain of that subject will be defined through these. Description of how these grow as proficiency increases is essential for a robust competency-based assessment, right? We've said that it's not just saying, okay, at grade 12, you'll have these skills. That's great, you've mastered it or you've not mastered. But that's too late. That's like the traditional assessment, right? At the end of the year, you say, oh, sorry, you didn't learn this. What's the point? What you want is that information to be fed into the system much earlier, right? So what you do is you have the descriptive scale, the proficiency scale built up so that you can access it earlier in time and take action on it. These descriptions are pathways for teaching and learning. We already talked about learning pathways briefly. So this is what will give you the proficiency increase. Learning progressions show what long-term growth look like for each domain or subject, right? At this point, what we've focused on is core skills or core subjects, core domains, and the scales that we have defined are domain-based. So for example, you'll have an English proficiency scale, you'll have a mathematics proficiency scale, and a science proficiency scale, and a reasoning one for IBT. But going forward, the idea is to develop these for 21st century skills. You have communication, the proficiency scale for communication, maybe one for collaboration, one for creativity. Those require a lot of effort and work, a lot of research before you can finalize those. You can be confident and then say, okay, this is how students progress, right? So those are works in progress. So I've talked about learning progressions, I've talked about how we use them. So what are they? How do we generate them? Learning progressions are progress maps developed from empirical evidence. There are two ways in which you can develop a progression map, right? You can say at level 1 or grade 1 or at the first level, these are the skills that students need to have. So how can you generate those skills? How can you describe those skills? What can you use? What can you do to generate that description? So for example, we have learning outcomes defined by NCERT, right? How do they come about? They are progressions, right? In grade 1, these are the skills, these are the outcomes. So in grade 2, these are the outcomes, so you have a progression there. How did they come about? What you do is you have a group of experts. They might be domain experts, they might be learning experts, they might be experts in psychology, they might be experts in different areas. They sit together ideally and come up with a list of and you probably include practitioners, teachers, to say what it is that students learn first, what is it that students need to learn next. So those are based on expert knowledge, but they can be subjective, right? They're based on expert knowledge, but there is no empirical validation of those skills. The other option, which ACR currently does, is we have a lot of assessment data. We've done IPT for almost 20 years now. Sorry, I think about 15 years now. And what we can do is we have a lot of data that we can use to say, okay, students at this level, they generally seem to have these skills. At the next level, students generally seem to have these skills. So we can actually use assessment data to generate those descriptions. How do we do that? We just use, so every question that we use will have a description, right? Every question that we use assesses a particular skill, right? So if we describe that and we say these questions assess these skills and they fall at this level and students fall at that level, they have the ability to answer these questions, we know what skills they possess, right? The challenge is to put the students and the questions together on one scale. That we use item response theory, IRT, for, right? That's a robust way of doing it. And I just gave the example of IBT, but what you need to understand is this is the way proficiency scales are generated the world over, right? Whether it is the program of International Student Assessment, PISA, or NCERT's National Assessment Survey, it doesn't matter where a good, modern, robust assessment generally generates these scales based on empirical data, based on data generated from the assessment. Okay, so you have these. You can say first level. This is the students who fall on the first level. They have these skills, and it's very, very robust because we can collaborate that with evidence from the questions. You can easily look at those questions and say, oh, okay, you claim that this is the descriptor, you claim that this is what the question is assessing, but it's not, right? So you look at multiple pieces of evidence. You have maybe hundreds of questions across different assessments, and then you generate that description, right? So a progress maps developed from empirical evidence assessments articulate how a concept is organized. So you can say from one level to the next, what the progression is. Much more than mere identification of sub-concepts of the main concept. So what you do is you don't just say, okay, level 1 you have some vocabulary, level 2 you have this vocabulary, etc. You also have some idea of interaction. So for example, if you have this level of vocabulary, how much reading can you do, right? You need to understand those connections. So the attempt is to, in these proficiency scales descriptions, is to include those connections. Let me just make sure I'm on time. So here's an example of a learning progression. We've talked about it a lot. We talked about theory a lot, so I want to give you an example. So establishing where individuals are in their learning depends first on understanding what long-term progress in a learning area looks like. Yeah, you've said that multiple times. So this is a basic progression of students who are learning to read. So first they notice print, then they might recognize familiar print. They may not know it's letter A, but they may say, okay, these look like letters. Read the pictures, then read some words and pictures. Then slowly they start reading sentences, and then they start reading texts, right? The complexity increases. You know what the next step is. And once they start reading text, you move from decoding, which is basically reading letters and words and sentences, to actually comprehending, to understanding the text. So now from where the star is, level 6 and 7, you started to get into what skills you need to understand text. So for example, locate information using direct word matching. So for example, if you have Gopal's father is Ramu in the text, and you say who is Gopal's father, so you have a direct matching of the words, and you just pick that out and write. So that's the first level. Slowly you use synonyms, you use more complex skills, you go into interpretation, inference, etc. right? But the idea is that there is a progress map, right, which you can use, which you can see, okay, student is at this level. So for example, that star indicates the level of one student, right? So at this point, the student is likely to be able to locate information using synonyms. But what is important is also for the teacher and the student, they know what is the next step. They know that the next thing that they'll learn is making simple interpretations of simple text, right? And then make inferences and manage low-level computing information. So you can see the progress being made. You can say, okay, you're able to do these tasks, you have these, you acquired these skills, so what can we do next? The teacher can actually design exercises, tasks, based on these descriptions. We can also use the progression to monitor students' progress over time. So one is that we said we could teach or we could learn the next level, the next skill that you're supposed to acquire. But every time you do that, you also need to know if the student has actually acquired that skill, right? So you need to assess to see if they have actually, if what you've done has been effective. So over the years, you can see if, for example, in grade 4 they were at level 6 or grade 3 they were at level 6. By the time they get to grade 6, have they moved up to level 10, level 9? What progress are they making? So you can actually plot growth over time. Remember that we talked about this earlier. We talked about in height, you know if you grow 2 inches, you've grown, right? But if you say 60% and 70%, I don't know if you've grown. But here if I say you're at level 7 last year, this year you're at level 9, I'm confident that you've grown, that you improved, right? That's the key difference. So, as teachers, how do we use these progressions? Right? Where can I find these progressions? Can I use them in my class? What happens is, invariably learning progressions, especially based on assessments, are developed by large-scale assessments, right? So for example, you have a PISA scale, you have a Pearl scale for reading, you have a TIM scale for mathematics and science. You have various scales like that. Also, you have the National Assessment Survey for NCERT, they have an Indian scale. But what happens is, it might be difficult to access and difficult to use those, right? And sometimes what happens is, these assessments are focused on particular levels. So for example, PISA, do you know who the target audience for PISA is? What level, what grade students write the PISA assessment?
16.
That's 15-year-olds, right? PISA assessment is intended for 15-year-olds. So if I'm teaching grade 3, it's very, very unlikely that I'll be able to use that progression to teach my student, right? So 15-year-olds, so school-leaving students. PISA's purpose is different. So what you need is, and the National Assessment Survey in India, I think, does 3, 5, 8, and 10, if I remember correctly, right? So you may have gaps where you need for grade 4 or grade 6. Right? So these scales include descriptions of student abilities, as we have seen. They are a very good basis to develop learning progressions. So what we have seen is there are these proficiency scales available, but now our challenge is to find proficiency scales that we can use in this classroom, right? That we can use in the school. So that's where assessments like IBT step in. Excuse me. So that's where assessments like IBT step in, which give you a progression from all the way from grade 3 to grade 10, and in the 4 subjects that we've discussed, right? English, mathematics, science, and reasoning. So that's the other issue with large-scale assessments. So for example, PISA generally focuses on English, maths, and science. The National Assessment Survey does more, but many other, so for example, Pearls and TIMS, which do grade 4 and grade 8, they only focus on literacy, which is reading, and maths and science. There's nothing for social science, there's nothing for other subjects, right? So those are the kind of gaps that you're trying to fill. So how can schools access and use proficiency skills? IBT is an example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift to introducing IBT. I think I'll take about 10 more minutes. So please bear with me. So the IBT, and for those who don't know, it's the International Benchmark Test, right? The IBT is a grade-appropriate, high-quality, skill-based assessment in English, mathematics, science, and reasoning. covering levels from grade 3 to grade 10, covering levels from 3 to 10. The idea is that the IBT enables you to compare your students' performance across different geographies. So for example, you might be able to want to compare it with other Indian students. You may want to compare it with other international students, right? Or those students who take IBT. Now, because of that, IBT has some advantages and IBT has some disadvantages. What are they? The good thing is to be able to generate that difference, to actually be able to see where you are in comparison to your peer groups, your compatriots, or your peer groups in different countries. Of course, that also means that we need to come up with a minimum curriculum or a common curriculum that may or may not always have one-on-one correspondence with the Indian curriculum, right? That's something that we need to live with. It's true for any international assessment, right? If you do an international assessment, you're going to put together a common curriculum that that pulls out areas that we think are important for that age group. As I said, ACR India has, I think now it's become 15 years of experience. Benchmark students' performance across schools nationally and regionally. Right, so IBT, I said, allows you to benchmark your students' performance across different geographies, different schools. But what it also does is it provides the learning progression, the proficiency scale, so that you can track individual students' performance across years, right? It gives you a report that allows you to say, okay, I was at band 1 last year, or level 1 last year, now I'm at band 3, now I'm at band 5, I've improved. And you can do this as an individual student, or if you're a teacher, you can do this for your class group, right? So let me show you how. So, let me just go further to reports. Before I show you the reports, I just want to emphasize that IBT reports are high quality, reader friendly, customized to needs of stakeholders. What do I mean by that? So for example, I was talking about benchmarking your students' performance with international students. As a teacher, do you want to see where your entire population is compared to national students? You may be, but that's not going to make a huge impact on what you teach. So that sort of report is more interesting to school leaders, right? To management. They want to see how the whole school, you get a bird's eye view of how the whole school is performing, right? So that sort of report is intended for those stakeholders. Now, for teachers and individual students, we have different reports that go into minute detail and talk about which skills students have, where they've done well, what are challenges, which questions they've answered correctly, and not just the questions they've answered correctly, but the description of that question. So basically, it will tell you what skill was assessed in that question. And further, you can actually compare the performance of your students with Indian and international students question-wise. You can say, okay, this question, I think my students should be able to do, but they've done poorly, why is it? And then you can see, maybe it is a difficult question, and international students and Indian students also have performed poorly, right? Then you say, okay, maybe the question is difficult. So it gives you very, very minute, very fine-grained analysis and data. So they place students on scales to monitor trends and identify individual progress, as I mentioned. Allow teachers to identify and target strengths and areas to improve. The 5 reports that IBT has are Described Achievement Report, Benchmark Report, School Report, and Student Report. We'll briefly talk about all of them. The interactive report is actually an Excel worksheet. The first 4 are hard copy reports, which you print out. The Excel report allows you to customize it any way you want. It allows you to play around. There are macros built in. So you can actually go and say, okay, I'm not interested in grade 6, I'm at least grade 3. Can I look at what is the performance in grade 3? You can see that quickly. You can also look at specific, strands, etc. You can play around with it a lot. So it's a very, very user-friendly, very powerful report. So whenever I'm asked to analyze the strengths and challenges of different schools and analyze reports from different schools, that's the report I go to straight off, right? That gives me all the information that I need. So because we've talked about proficiency scales, I want to start with the Described Achievement Report, even though the benchmark report would normally be for a higher level stakeholder. The Described Achievement Report, one thing that I also should emphasize is every ACR report is self-explanatory. It has a legend, it helps you how to read it tells you how to read the report, it tells you what is the purpose of the report, it describes it in detail. The Described Achievement Report places each student in a unique achievement band of the IBT scale and provides details of the range of skills and understandings for each subject. A learning progression, right? We've talked about learning progression. We've said that we need descriptions of skills. Now, what I wanted to focus on here is, I don't think we have time to read through this. So what happens is, let's see if I can make it larger. So what happens is the progression, the complexity increases from level 1 to level 2 to level 3. But what we do is we capture this one-page report for ease of use. We have a lot of information, but we also find that if we provide all that information, teachers find it overwhelming. So what happens is we summarize the skills at each level in one paragraph so that we can fit it into a A4 size sheet. The idea in the future is to make it online so that depending on what level of information you need, if you just want a summary paragraph, you can use it. But if you want deeper information, a one-page report on each level, you can get that. You can get examples of items from that level. That is the direction in which we're moving, but that's going to take time to build. So the idea is, you can see that the distribution of students, this is a grade 6 report in English, and you can see that the students range from band 1 all the way up to band, my eyes are not that great, band 6, I think. There's even one student at band 8. So what happens is, you understand that students are at different levels, but for each individual student, you know which band they're at. So each black dot to the left of the description is an individual student. So you can see exactly, and you'll have other reports that tell you who that student is, right? Who that student is and where they are and what are the skills that they possess. So these ability bands are the descriptions that we have been talking about. The benchmark report. So these are the other reports. The benchmark report allows you to compare your performance as a population from your school to the India population or the international population. So if you want to see how your grade 3 students are doing vis-a-vis other Indian students in India, right? You can do that based on this. So you can say, for example, here, this is again grade 6, and I believe it's still English. So the green is your school, the blue is the national population, and the orange is the international population. What we normally do is we lop off the top and the bottom 10% so that the outliers are excluded and you have the average population included, right? So you can quickly look at averages, 90th percentile, 70th percentile, etc. to see where your students are. And again, it's reported against the scale. You can see on the left the bands are included, and you have the students also there. These reports, the school reports, are intended for the teacher. They give you class-wise information, student-wise information. So if you're teaching class 3A, you know that you have 20 students. How many of them have answered this question correctly? And if there are particular questions you're interested in, you can look at that question and say, okay, how many international students got it correctly? How many Indian students got it correctly? What is the descriptor? What is the skill that it is assessing? So it provides you a powerful report to look at your students' performance. Additionally, these questions are clubbed together in different strands. So for example, you have a strand of reading. In English, you have reading, spelling, punctuation, grammar, vocabulary. So you can actually not just worry about individual, if you want to look at a more coarse-grained picture, you want to put it together to see which skills they're doing well at, you can look at strands. I just have a couple more slides, so I'll finish quickly. The student reports are the reports which are intended for individual students. All of the reports that we put together for other users are now captured for that, all that information is captured for an individual student. So if I want to see what my performance is like, the report includes my performance on every question, the descriptor, different strands, how I perform compared to India, international students, what band level I'm at, and it also includes the band descriptor. So if I say I'm at band 5, you can see what that description is, parents can see what that description is. It's a comprehensive report that includes all of this information. The interactive report I've already talked to you about. It is the report that that allows you to customize the information and analyze it in the way you want. So final slide. The idea is to use these progressive achievement scales or the progressive achievement approach to improve learning. So you start with evidence. You start with gathering evidence, you do the assessment, you understand what the current scenario is, where your students are. And that doesn't mean, so that it's important that that is well defined. Where your current students are should actually be a description of their skills, not just marks or grades or percentile, right? Once you know that, you know what the next steps are. You identify what the next steps are. You use the scale to say, okay, students are here. What should I teach them next? And then you do intervention. You actually look at what you can do to make that transformation happen, to make that change happen, make them grow. And finally, you close again to see if that intervention has been effective by again conducting an assessment, and the cycle continues. Thank you. I hope I didn't take too long. I hope that was interesting. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much, sir, for igniting the thought process in our minds as we strive towards implementing competency-based assessments. Respected audience, the floor is now open for the question-answer session. Request you to please raise your hand in case you have a question for one of our esteemed speakers so that we may assist you for the next 10 minutes. The floor stands open. Any questions? Anyone? Anything that has ignited our minds and we would like to ask and be guided about?
So if there are no questions, I'm suggesting that we could sort of, if there are particular topics that you want to discuss further. So to me, the most important takeaways from the presentation are the idea of the learning progression, right? The idea that old traditional assessments are reported against percentages and grades. So if you don't ask me questions, maybe I should ask you questions. So why should we move to you have a question? I think sir didn't want me to ask a question. Good.
I'd like to speak on behalf of all present, and since I am not technically an educator, but I facilitate education, I would request the gurus present here to bear with me. Now, what I understand typically from your kind of an assessment is it becomes essentially an add-on for a typical K-12 school. Because, again, pardon me if I don't understand it correctly, I have to comply with the CBSE and NCERT and other statutory stuff, number one. Number two, I have to comply with the centuries-old mindset of my customers, which are the parents, right? If I start telling them today about emotional intelligence or compassion, etc., bear with me, the reply is, oh Paji, pehla ye dasso ke अंग्रेजी बोलनी आई बच्चे को कि नहीं आई, और translated, what is his improvement in mathematics? 60%, 70%, right? So is it, what I am understanding, is that correct? So we are trying to steer the school education towards a scenario which makes them probably more employable, as Dr. Bhatnagar said, or Mr. Bhatnagar said, wage or self, more employable by having some additional skills. And how does it correlate to the statutory requirements of today as a K-12 school unit? Thank you.
Others can also chip in if you want to add something. But I think I can talk about it from the perspective of IBT. It is definitely an additional assessment, right? We're not helping you comply with any statutory requirements. That requires a different approach. Having said that, I think the fundamental question is why we're doing this, right? So one of the things that you talked about is the issue with talking to your parents or talking to your customers or clients, the stakeholders really, and convincing them that you want to move to this approach. I think you sort of caught on to that right there. It's employability, right? I mean, why are we doing all of this? One, we definitely want, if you look at the PISA sort of definition of what it is we're looking for, we want global citizens, we want citizens, citizens with different skills, but also an important, or in fact maybe a major component of that is how well they do in the economy or how well they do when they go to university. And I suspect that the jump to that may not be too difficult for parents. Now, if you say, oh, look at this is the skill, this is that, yeah, I understand that it's complex. But if we come back to the simple fundamental point that there's a reason behind why we're doing this, there's a purpose, and that purpose is to make sure that your children have a better life, I think parents will sort of buy into that. Of course, it's not as simple as I make it sound. It needs to be communicated, the strategies, how to be done properly, etc. But I think there is scope for that. Or sir, you can add if you want to.
तो मैं इसमें थोड़ा सा ऐड करूँगी क्योंकि ये जो टूल है एनी टाइप ऑफ असेसमेंट, लेट अस फॉरगेट अबाउट दिस IBT और एनीथिंग, दिस इज टूल फॉर टीचर्स. क्योंकि बहुत सारा एविडेंस है कि बच्चे पढ़ रहे हैं, सालों साल पढ़ रहे हैं, पर वो आगे बढ़ नहीं रहे. उसका कारण ये है कि एज ए टीचर, आई हैव बीन अ टीचर, मुझे एग्जैक्टली पता नहीं होता कि बेस्ड ऑन रिगरस टूल, साइंटिफिक टूल, बच्चे कहाँ हैं. I never doubt intent of a teacher because I have been a teacher. टीचर चाहती है कि बच्चे आगे बढ़ें, बट वो क्लासरूम असेसमेंट्स जो होते हैं वो स्टैंडर्डाइज नहीं होते, वो टेक्निकली ड्रिवन नहीं होते. दैट इज ड्रिवन बाय ए टेक्स्ट बुक जो हम पढ़ा रहे हैं, उससे होता है, और वो मुझे सही में बताता ही नहीं कि बच्चे को क्या पता है. तो इन असेसमेंट्स का पर्पस ये है कि टीचर को सच में इंफॉर्मेशन मिले बच्चा कहाँ है. एंड दैट्स व्हाट ऑल्सो वेल सेड, दैट बच्चा कहाँ है ये सबसे ज़्यादा ड्राइव करता है लर्निंग को. बट टीचर का असली काम वहाँ से शुरू हो जाता है कि ठीक है, अब मुझे पता चल गया बच्चा यहाँ है, तो अब मैं करूँ क्या कि वो आगे बढ़े. तो वो चीज़ टीचर को बिल्ड करना है. सो दीज असेसमेंट्स आर मेड टू गिव टीचर अ रोबस्ट, टेक्निकल, साइंटिफिकली रिसर्च बेस्ड एविडेंस की लर्न वेयर इज लर्नर. तो ये इसका पर्पस है. ऑफ कोर्स आप जिस एंगल से बोल रहे हैं तो वहाँ इसको एड ऑन देखा जाता है, बट दिस इज ए टूल दैट आई विल से. थैंक यू. Yeah, please.
So we undertook this IBT assessment this session, and recently we were just doing our own analysis. आप लोग तो हमको analysis करके देते ही हैं. So when we looked at it, so we were looking at the mathematics analysis. In that we had, the numbers, the algebra, and then we had the 3D shapes, the shapes. And we realized कि हमारे बच्चों ने shapes में they have not been able to score. And that's when we decided कि अब अगली बारी harmony में we are going to bring shapes because shapes have more real life learning. Shapes is not something जिसको आप notebook में draw करके सिखा सकते हैं. जब हम उसके ऊपर बच्चों को we'll make them do some project work, we will engage them in they actually relating it with their day-to-day life is when. So this, by analyzing, by looking at their result analysis, we could do our syllabus planning, our annual pedagogical plan. A meaningful inference could be drawn out of that, and we are hoping कि आगे जाके उसको we will be able to correct it.
Most respectfully, ma'am, I appreciate and accept your example, very well said. And ma'am, your clarification also very well accepted and appreciated. However, indirectly what I was trying to say is that for schools at a slightly different level than the one we are sitting in, how do you sell this to the stakeholders? How do you help me sell this to my stakeholders? To the teachers who get extra work, to the students who are looking at a later, better yield or a result. But today, they have to put in extra effort. And thereby, to my main client, the parent. Sorry if it is out of context, but that is my concern right now.
I think that's a perfectly valid concern. I think it's an important question. We can keep doing additional assessments, but unless you're convinced that they're effective, that they're useful, there's no point in doing them, right? And if you're not convinced that they're effective or useful, you might do the assessment, you may pay for it, you may do the assessment, but you're going to throw the report in the dustbin or in the shelf and never going to use it, right? So, but my response to you is going to be everything that has been discussed earlier, right? Because the reason why there are no gimmicks, we're not going to sell it because it does this or it does that. We genuinely believe that there will be improvement in learning. As ma'am said, for example, we expect that in GD Goenka in a couple of years or in a year's time, students will do better at shapes. Now, again, like I said simply that you can tell parents that it leads to better life outcomes. But communication strategies are absolutely important. We've not talked about those, right? How do you communicate that? And honestly, I'm not a marketing person. I won't be able to give you that. But on the other hand, I genuinely believe that I've worked on IPT. I've created the questions there. I've worked on the reports, right? I genuinely believe that it makes a difference, right? I'm standing here in front of you and talking about it because I passionately believe that IPT will make a difference in students' learning levels. So, right. So, I will continue to emphasize that that's the message that needs to go to parents. Any other questions? Thank you, sir, for enlivening that discussion. That was useful.
Thank you so much. This brings us to an end of the Q&A session. Dear audience, thank you so much for your attention and interest. If you think you can do it, that's confidence. If you do it, that's competency. GDGPS Sector 48, along with ACER, wishes to humbly acknowledge and celebrate this enlightening platform of the Conclave, where great minds confluence with a shared vision in focus and great ideas to birth. All the guests are now requested to please proceed for a hot, sumptuous lunch by exiting from the third floor towards the CD block. The guests seated in the front of the auditorium are requested to exit first from the third floor CD block, followed by the guests seated towards the rows behind. We are grateful for your presence and thank you so much. Have a lovely day.